back, everyone, to our third episode here on Above the Line, where tradition meets innovation, a podcast brought to you by the Holt Meadow Group. Today's episode is very interesting. Today's episode, we are delving deep into ways to look at your asset, your multifamily asset, and see how it's performing and if it is performing optimally. Newsflash, it's not always all about the balance sheet. I know they tell you it's all about the numbers, and large in part numbers are a way of looking at things, but there's a softer side that we look at in property management and in evaluating an asset that you're looking at potentially purchasing. Tenant engagement, participation, and satisfaction are key important elements that are on the softer side of things that can sometimes trigger a proficient property manager and an owner to assess whether or not something in the asset needs to change. Today, we're joined in studio by two guests who have a thumb on the pulse as to what these things are and can really bring to light for us things to look out for. So please join me in welcoming our guests to the third episode here as we're about to tee it high and let it fly. So joining us today in studio, our guests, first and foremost, is Mr. Oren Turkienicz. He joins us as the CEO and president of Holt Meadow Group. Oren has an extensive background in development in all items relating from finance to acquisitions to underwriting and even construction. Oren joins us with a penchant for looking at new ways of operating assets. He's very particularly interested in prop tech when it comes to the management of assets. And we're really blessed and excited to have him here with us today in studio. So please welcome Oren Turkienicz, everyone.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. But what you don't know about Oren Turkienicz is, Oren, tell the folks something they don't know about you.
Putting me on the spot. Obsessed with basketball. I have a nice family. Looking forward to learning more about the industry and talking more about the industry. I think that that's it. I'm obsessed with real estate. It's a passion of mine. And that's all I got.
Well, basketball, you should be very happy with the Scotty Barnes decision. And how do we feel about that, Oren?
I'm living with the fact that the Raptors won a championship in my lifetime. So any decisions at this point they've got a free game to be bad for the next 20 years. Yeah, no, they can do whatever they want. They've got free reign. But I think the signing's great. I think Emmanuel Quickley is going to be awesome. Yeah. And I think we've got a good core. I think we'll actually be in the play-on position this year.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And Oren, thank you for that. We'll talk more Raptors later.
Sure. Next
in the studio, our beloved Daniela Douglas. Back again from the second episode, joining us again on the third episode. Daniela is our Senior Vice President of Operations at the Holt Meadow Group. Prior to coming to Holt Meadow, Daniela was with CapREIT for over 11 years. She oversaw the property management division of CapREIT. Then after that, she spent over 3.5 years as Director of Asset Management with Starlight. Daniela has overseen portfolios in excess of 5,000 units, and she's really excited to be here with myself and Oren today, talking about the finer skills and the finer things you need to look for in multifamily assets. Daniela, thank you for coming here again. And what we learned about you last time is strawberries. But is there anything else that the folks would like to know that Daniela Douglas does?
Thank you, Matt, for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Oren today. I am a pretty simple person. For me, family is the most important thing. I don't do extravagant things. I just family time, spend as much as I can with my children and my husband. And my second passion is real estate and is the property and asset management. But that comes after my family, of course. So really nothing much about me. As I said, I am plain and simple as it can be.
Plain and simple is great. And we value that and we welcome you both here. So thank you both for coming today.
Thank you.
So guys, we have on the show, we have a series of questions that we like to delve into with our guests. We have audience members that write in questions. I'm not allowed to share them with you. So yes, Oren, I know I did put you on the spot. There will be a little bit more of that today. I promise it's all good.
I'll be on my toes.
I have no doubt. We also have a fun little bit at the end of the game here, Oren, or at the end of the podcast, which is a game, and it's called the Wacko Wheel. And that is where chance decides your fate. The wheel will end where it lands, and whatever that is, are these questions on these cards right here that neither you nor Daniela, for the folks at home, know what I'm going to be asking you, okay? We'll go over the rules of the game when we get there. I promise you they're a lot of fun. Daniela did it last week. She's already laughing. She knows what she's about to get into. Oren, welcome.
Awesome.
I have a question. Now, this question is for both of you, so you can both feel free to chime in, okay? It's regarding communication and property management, which I think we can all agree is very, very critical, right? What innovative communication strategies have you found effective in enhancing tenant engagement and satisfaction? Daniela, let's start with you.
You're absolutely right. Communication is very important in our field. We all do what we have to do behind the scenes. But if our residents don't know what's happening, what we are doing, that's a problem. Yeah. They will assume that nothing is happening. What I find very successful in my experience and my years in the industry is over-communicating, actually. Notifying residents about everything. If you perform some minor repairs to anything, just inform the tenants. Let them know what's happening in the building. Let them know what you are doing to ensure their lifestyle it's being affected in a positive way. Everything what we do and we work on, it will affect the lifestyle of our residents, and we need to share that. So communication, it's critical and ensures that the residents know what's happening. They are updated. It's about informing them. At the end of the day, that's their home.
Right.
And we need to be transparent and to show them our presence and what's happening and keep them updated. And that's, very important.
So what I'm getting from this is there's no such thing as over-communicating. Let them know everything, every step of the way, the action plan, everything else. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oren, I see you wanting to jump in on this.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Yeah, I think that it's going to be a theme with a lot of my responses, I think, when it comes to this type of communication or tenant engagement, is that things are changing. Mindsets are changing, and that's changing not just on the ownership model, but also, or the ownership perspective, but also on the tenant perspective.
That's interesting.
In general, people want to be more, there needs to be more transparency. Not that to say that there wasn't before, but I think what we're finding is that a lot of people don't understand the process, and they expect when there's a notice sent into the property manager, things get done like immediately. They want immediate gratification. They want immediate responses, which I think there has to be an education for everybody, an understanding that things take time, and here's why. Here's what we're doing. We've made our submission to X. We're going to expect the response by this date. And I think once people are knowledgeable about what goes into the job, I think there's a little bit, not always, but there's a little bit more understanding of, okay, they're working on it, and I can understand where they're coming from. And I think it goes to this concept of being open, to Daniela's point, being transparent, discussing with them, letting them know, and open communication. And I think that's a huge shift in mentality in new rental management.
Right.
This like instant notice on when there are issues in the building, and then equivalent instant response as to this query has been sent in, we've received it, here's what we're doing to ensure that this is getting done. And as long as everybody's on the same page, I think that leads to more seamless communication, engagement, a more seamless community. And I think without it, you get frustration. You get people who are saying, I've sent this issue in 10 times. Why isn't it getting done? Well, if they don't know what the process is, maybe it's on them it's their lack of understanding. Maybe the work isn't getting done for whatever reason. And there's obviously some reasons why you can and can't share certain things. There's some proprietary reasons. There's some reasons that ownership may have some of their own reasons. But, towing that line and making sure that tenants are communicated with it fairly, I think it has to be approached from that perspective.
Fairly and timely.
Fairly and timely and consistently, because I think that's where you get this frustration and you get this pushback from tenants towards ownership and towards the landlord. So not to say that this is a new mentality, but I think as we've progressed further and further, and as there's sort of a different demographic of renters who are starting to rent, there's more of an expectation for an instant response that I think
I agree
they're owed, and they're also owed it on a consistent and transparent basis.
Okay, I have to stop you there because that's perfect in terms of a segue into my next question, right? Which is, and we'll start with you, Oren, because you're going on this tip right now, okay? What role do you see emerging technologies playing in the future of property management, particularly in relation to tenant engagement, tenant communication, tenant satisfaction, and communication?
I think it's massive. I think you look south of the border in the U.S. and they've been focused on prop tech for a long time. Europe as well.
Yes.
We've been slow at it, mainly because new purpose-built rental and integration of prop tech systems has lagged here. Just lack of supply, lack of new builds. It's harder to integrate them. But it's strategic, because I think applying prop tech everywhere is not a strategic approach to it. I think there are different demographics who appreciate different style of prop tech, whether that's your BAS system, whether it's QR codes, whether it's whatever you want to implement.
Right.
If your demographic is elderly and they're in a certain age group, they might not appreciate everything on their smartphone. But if you're center ice in midtown Toronto or downtown, or it's a student demographic or younger, they won't appreciate physical paper getting dropped off and clutter.
Letter under the door, right?
And becoming clutter and litter in there. So it's being strategic and trying to identify which areas need what. But I think it's crucial, especially on new builds, because I think it adds this sort of, I'm going to say seamless quite a bit, but I think it all sort of contributes to this seamless operation. Seamless communication, I guess, is the theme of this discussion. And if I can communicate with tenants digitally without having to send out notices and send out everything, and they're able to communicate with us seamlessly without having to send us an email to here and this to there, it just removes this unnecessary burden of tracking things down. It's again going back to sort of that
becomes
immediate
barrier free, right?
Barrier free, and then it's not just the communication tools. I mean, obviously integrating some apps or integrating some communication or issues in the building, you can report right away. But I think it also comes down to just integrative, intuitive prop tech, i.e. you can scan and get into an amenity space, you can sign up quickly, you can book things out, and really it's creating a community that is an extension of your unit. And my focus being, on this discussion being on the new build side.
Yes.
But I think that extends even on the existing side, because there are existing assets that have amenities, of course, that people would like use of. And how do you create a feeling of community in these buildings when it was, it might have been looked at as purely as a rental unit that somebody's going to go and they're not going to really utilize the rest of the building, or it hasn't been kept up. Mm-hmm. And I think integrating prop tech does a great job of creating and enhancing a building's feeling of community. It can connect you really well with the rest of the residents. So I think, in a long-winded answer, I think that's sort of where we're sort of look at stuff from an intangible perspective, is how does that work alongside the feeling of the building, and how do you integrate it strategically so that everybody feels more of a sense of community?
So that's interesting. So prop tech, you're looking at it as, and we know certain companies and certain proprietary things that we've used, where we've looked at older assets that didn't have the ability to create that close-knit community, right? Using a modern technology, an overlay system, if you would, or whatever it is, to help foster that communication and that type of community, right? Whether it's booking a party room or booking, pool or whatever it is that they want to do, having the ability to do that instead of always having to go to the management office, if they can do it from the comfort of their own suite or whatever it is wonderful. But you're right, with a lot of the older assets that didn't have that capability built in, if management hasn't brought that in, is that a negative detraction for you if you're looking at it as a tenant maybe wanting to move there?
From the perspective of a tenant, again, it goes back to, I think, the demographic who would be renting. I mean, someone my age or younger, I'd say, it'd be kind of a pain if I had to go and walk down and knock on the manager's door and explain to them what my problem is, or can I book this? And they're not on lunch, and I can't find them, or I got to call their cell. Or whereas if I had the ability to just sort of say, I'm going to book it, it's available on Saturday at 2, click, and I'm done. Again, it's I don't know if it's a good trade, it's a bad trade. I think that's a whole discussion I don't want to get into. But the instant gratification, it feels really good, especially in a place that you're living, to get things done quickly. I want to book something, it's done. I want to talk to somebody, it's done. I want to sell my couch to Unit 111, I can communicate really, really quickly.
Right.
So I think that, but again, there's a different lifestyle to everybody. If you're building or live in a building in Listowel, maybe that's not that important to you. Maybe you want that different interaction. You want that sort of in-person discussion. We've spoken to people in some of the buildings that we manage that actually prefer to not have laundry in their unit. They prefer to be in a community laundry because it's that social interaction that people crave and people like and want and go out and seek. And I don't think there's any wrong answer, but I think to your point in terms of detraction of whether I'd look at it from as an asset, as a renter, as an owner, I think there is this concept that rental is a one size fits all. It's a rental building. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I think that you really have to start digging down into the market and not just, okay, what are the rents? What are the costs?
Right.
But you're really saying, okay, who's the demo that I'm renting to? What do they like? If I introduced this, would it make things better or would they hate it? So, and I think that goes into not just the discussion on acquisition. I think it goes into the discussion on our side from the management perspective
100%.
to say, well, how do we communicate with these people? Are they having issues with their current in-place management, or their in-place super? Why? Is there communication issues? Is there a lack of things getting fixed in a timely manner? So it all goes into it. So I think that there's a changing perspective when it comes to management, renters, and it starts with prop tech, but it comes down to how do you assess whether a building's performance can be improved by introducing that prop tech.
So thank you for that.
I don't want to monopolize the time, so I'm going to get Daniela to jump in.
I have more questions I do have to get to, but that is, you and I have talked about that topic, and I know Daniela has too. We're quite passionate on that. So there's another show we could do on that, but we'll park that for now. Daniela, this question is for you, actually. And Oren, even though it's for Daniela, you may have some strong opinions about this and want to chime in. Let Daniela go first.
Sure, I'll hold back.
Right. Daniela, what are some of the signs? Okay, these are visible signs that you can see as a property operator as to whether or not you feel a given asset is underperforming.
That's actually a question that can be answered probably in a full episode.
I
will try my best to keep it to the main point. At Holt Meadow, we have an assessment performance system. So what do I mean by that? Our performance assessment system incorporates financial performance assessment, risk, cost of operating, and cash flow projection. It's quite a complex, process to determine whether an asset is performing or not. When we look at the financial performance, we assess the financial results against the benchmarks, the established benchmarks of the asset, whether it's an asset or a portfolio. Risk, unforeseen losses from that, asset. Cost of operating does not limit of your repair and maintenance. Cost of operating includes capital expenditure that it's whether forecasted or not, surprises, you name it. Includes repair and maintenance, includes utility cost, overhead cost, and the cash flow. Cash flow is critical. We all create a projected cash flow. If that cash flow, it turns to be negative, meaning it does not give the projected cash flow, that asset it's underperforming.
Yes.
And once we evaluate the asset performance, we decide whether an asset is performing or not. And based on our data and analytics, we create a plan of action which we work on presenting to our owners, or if it's an own asset, we internalize it and set up an action plan. So those are the main elements that are incorporated in our asset performance evaluation, and will tell us if it's a performing or not asset.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. And that is on the financial side of things, which is, we do have to look at that obviously to see.
That's right.
Oren, deviating from that a little bit, in your experience as an owner and an operator, let's pretend you didn't have the P&L, you didn't have the profit loss statement, you didn't have the balance sheet, you didn't have any of that information. Is there anything to your trained eye where you can look at something, maybe walk into a building, take a look and go, they could be doing a lot better here?
Step one is I'd send Daniela in to take a look at the building and tell me if it's good.
Yes, we would send Daniela. Yeah.
Yes. But I think that you taking a walk around, I think touring is a very, very important aspect of acquiring any asset and determining how things are going.
Interesting. So you don't believe in buying sight unseen?
Never.
Tell me why. Why?
Seeing is believing. You got to go and take a look at the assets. And this is a perfect, the question is nail on the head. I mean, the fact is that without any of that information, you can walk through, you can see how things are deteriorating or not.
Right.
You can take a look at elevators to see how they're functioning or not. Everything looks good on Google Maps.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
You can, it doesn't matter where you look, right? Pick an area in Toronto, pick an area in the world. Google Maps, it looks fantastic. If it doesn't look fantastic on Google Maps, and it's really, really bad in real life. So I think people can, I think it's in different asset classes. I think you can probably get the picture. If it's a vacant piece of land and up in Caledon, then you're probably good. But there are so many things that can go wrong with a fixed piece of real estate. If you go through a retrofit, the old saying is, well, take your budget, double it, and then throw it in the garbage, because it's probably wrong once you go through that. So once you punch a hole in a wall, you can find there's knob and tube. There could be asbestos. There could be. So you really have to do your best on a sniff test. When you go in, you look at the pipes, you look at the infrastructure, you look at the type of the heating system, you look at the type of electrical systems. You talk to the tenants when you walk through the units. How are they living? How are they, there's a lot of storage on the balconies. How do the balconies look? Like, these are all things you got to take a look at.
Right.
And right away, with experience and after seeing a lot of it, you can kind of determine, I think we're going to have to spend some CapEx here. Like, I think the balconies need some work in the next 5 years. Or, you see some spider webbing in the driveways. Going to have to replace the asphalt over. Those are some real costs. Yeah. And, if you're buying it at a aggressive price, hopefully not. But if you are, and these are things you have to take into account, not to mention, because at the end of the day, the numbers can be fine. They don't tell the whole story. They don't tell you the arrears in place. They don't tell you the land, the issues with some of the tenants. You might be at the landlord-tenant board. It's a whole other discussion on how to assess and evaluate your cash flows and your and the overall numbers and your OPEX. But I think when it goes to you're walking through an asset, you really have to get an idea and you need tons of experience. I mean, Daniela's got way more than I do, and she's done a way better job than me at looking at good assets and determining their value and their overall life. But she can go in there, and it is a talent to be able to walk through a building and sniff out problems.
So I agree with you fully, and I'm trying to get something from you guys here, and I'm almost there. So going back to you, Daniela, we're putting you on the hot seat with that mug there. When you walk in there, is there something that says to you, okay, I've been a property operator, I've been a director of asset management, director of property management, now with Holt Meadow, senior vice president of operations. You've probably seen a few things in your time that are examples of good and competent management and not so good management. What are some of those things that you just, when you walk into a building for Oren and you go, ooh, boy, we got to look into that. What would that be? Give me an example.
Well, for me, it starts with curb appeal to begin with. The cleanliness of the building, that's the first impression. Anyone, not just me, will take away from that asset. So if the grass is not cut, if, there is litter around, the asset, then it's a problem. That means no one pays attention to what's happening around the building.
Isn't that interesting?
The moment I enter the building, if the signage directing me to where things are, such as the management office. If there is no clear signage and I cannot navigate my way easily within, the main floor, that's a problem because like me, any prospective tenant will have issues finding the management office and they will leave because the market has product. And in today's world, our residents are looking for the service, for the convenience, and for the immediate response. And if they cannot get easy to the management office, they will be discouraged, they will leave. Another point, or something that people do, and it really drives me crazy, it's notices posted on the elevator doors or in any walls with Scotch tape. That indicates to me lack of attention to details and that visual. It's very simple and easy to attach a notice board where you can post your notices and you can replace them. Staff, very important. If I am entering a building and walk a building and the staff does not wear uniform or they don't have a professional appearance, that's a red flag for me. How are they representing the brand? How are they representing the ownership or the property management company? What's the representation on that? Then to Oren's point, I look at the balconies. If there is a lot of clutter on the balconies, definitely there is lack of communication in terms of, where items should be stored and how they should be stored. Boiler rooms. If they're mechanical equipment, I walk in mechanical equipment rooms and they are dark, dingy, dirty. It's a huge problem for me because that's an indication of staff or no one paying attention to actually what makes a building function properly.
Yeah.
And if something goes down, such as a boiler or water supply, then you have a major issue. And not having clean and properly lit mechanical rooms, it's an indication of things not being done properly. And then I go into more the technical details where I look for water penetration, what are the unit's conditions, the corridors conditions. I always check life and safety. For me, life and safety, it's actually priority number one because we are providing housing for people and ensuring life and safety, it's maintained properly. It's priority number one for me.
Fire access, fire escape.
Fire access, emergency exit signs, extinguishers being checked monthly, inspections done as regulated under the fire code, and everything else related, to fire safety.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that, guys.
I wanted to jump on, I have to.
Yes.
But I wanted to actually add to a couple of Daniela's points is that, so even if, just on the communication and direction to tenants, we're in a housing crisis right now. There's a lack of supply.
Yeah.
So and that sort of leads to people saying mentality is like, who cares? They're going to live here anyways. They have nowhere else. And it's the wrong mentality because at the end of the day, you want to future-proof your asset. You want to make sure that, if God willing, someday we fix this housing crisis, it could be 10 years, it could be 20, you want to be able to show your building off as one that is managed properly, communicated properly, and that has a good reputation amongst tenants.
Yes.
It's great to have tenants, who love their building. There's pride of ownership. I understand there's it's in a rent controlled system. The turnover is generally looked at as a positive thing from an owner's perspective. But when it comes to having sticky tenants, people who care, pride of ownership, who actually, want to see the building succeed and make sure that it looks beautiful, you have to communicate consistently on an ongoing basis.
So historic vacancy, you want to see it kept lower, right?
In general, I think you'd be happier with good paying tenants, ones who pay on time, but ones who care about the building.
Yeah.
And I think that where people run into issues are the ones that don't and don't want to pay and don't want to follow and don't want to communicate and don't want to, and that's where you run into these types of problems. And it's obviously, I'm oversimplifying it. There are a million different reasons, but I think as an owner, it benefits you to over communicate and direct people accordingly. And I just, again, tacking on to a couple of just one other thing, and it actually goes along with the communication style, is when you're walking through a building on a tour, noticing the interaction between the super or the property manager and the tenant. You kind of get a sense of what the relationship's like.
See, that's that intangible I'm looking for. That's the non, P&L statement, the non-balance sheet,
the non-physical intangibles. You just, because if you can tell there's some frustration, or you can tell there's some contention between the super and the tenant, there's issues. You know what I mean? And if it's consistent, it's not just you walk through 3 units and each of them sort of give attitude. They've had some run-ins and there's a reason for it. So it's something to explore.
Yeah.
If you have a building mother, for example, somebody who just loves it. We walked through a building and she knew everybody. She knew their birthday. She would drop off for anniversaries. She would send, just because she loved what she did and she leased the tenants out, the units out. She knows everybody and knew everybody's history. And you can tell that everybody loved her. And that, again, it wasn't a big community. It wasn't a building that had a million amenities. Again, it's this question of how do you generate a community? How do you generate this feeling of togetherness in a building that everybody's sharing? And again, it comes down to clear, concise communication and friendly management and good customer service. And that's what, if I'm going to plug here, but it's what we try to strive for here. What we do is we try to put that all together the best we can to ensure that the financial performance of an asset is there, is healthy, I should say, and that the customer service is there, because again, you want to future-proof your building from any issues moving forward.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And if I can add, to Oren's point, even if a tenant is leaving the building, if they leave in a positive note, with the market changes, they can always come back. And it's good to have a good reputation, precisely because of that. When you leave someone with a good impression, they will remember you.
So you get a positive reference, right?
They will positively reference you. They will give recommendations. They will become your advocate. And also, like anything in life, there is the return customer.
Right.
And if the experience is positive, they will be back.
That's right.
So you have to gain from communication.
That is a great point, which I have to pause with you guys there, because I committed to Chris that I would stay on time, and I see him looking at me. I'm known for that. We have listeners' email that write in to us. And these are questions that I don't share with you. You don't know, but I am going to ask you. And, we're all here just kind of kibutzing together and trying to come up with these ideas of what we do in our general practice, right? So, take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But I'm going to read the first one, and this is a question from Bahim from Toronto. How important is data analysis? Data analysis. I see both of you looking at me. In managing rental properties effectively, and what basic metrics should landlords focus on? We're going to start with Daniela on that one.
Thank you, Mahim. This is a very good and loaded question that, again, we can have another episode on. Data analysis, it's critical. If you don't have it, then you pretty much operate in dark.
Fly by night.
Fly by night. You make informed decisions only when you have data and you properly dissect it. It's very important. That's how you set your benchmarks, actually. You know your asset because of data that's been provided to you. You set your rental rates. You forecast your expenditure. You prepare your budgets. You project your turnover. Everything what you do in the business, it's based on data.
Now, Danielle, that's very important. And you're bang on. Does any of that have to do, so there might be a set of data that maybe a property management company looks at, which is probably the same. And it's part and parcel of what data an owner operator might look at. There might be different ones there, but demographics. So you can identify who your target audience is, what the brand you're cultivating, and the community of the building you're cultivating. Does that factor into any of the data that you look at or no?
Absolutely. So data really covers everything. Whether you are an owner operator, whether you are a third party manager, you need to be knowledgeable of what you are looking for. Demographic, it's very important. You need to conduct your market survey to identify the demographic. In fact, it's the way we look at it at Holt Meadow, it's a partnership between the property operator and the ownership. Because if you don't work in a partnership where you understand what is your role in the process and the lines are not clear and they are blurry, then the ownership and the property operator, they will kind of not connect, and it's going to be kind of not a very well oiled machine.
So there's like a misalignment of vision with the ownership and the property management.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, the brand, it's what everyone projects on the market. And if the brand is misrepresented by the property operator because they are not aligned with the ownership, then the whole thing,
goes awry.
Goes
interesting
sideways, right? So yes, understanding, the demographic as a property operator plays a critical role in how you position your asset on the market.
Oren, looking at it more from maybe a operator or an owner operator or a acquisition lens, what metrics are you looking at?
I mean, the obvious ones are going to be your rental rates, comparable rents, things like that. But I think to Daniela's point, and I guess the point of the question is that there's a massive amount of data out there that you can take a look at, demographic, local demographic, income. But there's also really more property specific. I forget the group that does it, that provides it, but they give a breakdown and they go out and poll and get basically a reading of what tenants are looking for. And obviously there are some that are, they want more 3 bedrooms, they want more of this, and some of them are obtainable and something that I think people can strive to offer. But I think there are some that, that might not be. But I think that at the end of the day, you kind of have to take it into account on most things. And I think you have to take it into account what you can add value to on a property basis. So we spoke about it earlier. It's like, what's the difference between a business, like buying a business and buying an asset? And there's differences, of course, but I think at the end of the day, you're building a brand. You're building, and we say it quite a bit, it's not a condo. You don't build it and you don't buy it and then sell it and you're done. You're releasing that asset every year, whether your turnover is 100% or if it's 10%. So you've got to be able to sell your brand on every time somebody walks through that door. So you're building a brand as a business on each of your buildings. So it's determining every year. We own and manage some student housing properties that has large turnover just by nature of that asset class.
Yeah.
And it's determining, okay, well, the rents are here, but why? And the students are looking in this area, but why? And it's the same thing on the tenant side. It's, we have some vacancy. Why is it taking longer? Is it the time of year? Is it something we're not offering? Is it something? So you really have to dive in on some of this. There's tangible data, there's intangible data, and trying to get a sense of it. So when you're looking at assets and you're saying, well, why does this one have so much turnover? There's an issue, right? In general, you're saying, oh, great turnover. That's great. Rents can go up. But why is there so much turnover in a market that's so tight? And what's going on in the asset? Is the area, in a position of transition? Is that causing some issues on the lease up? Is the building operation going? So diving into it, and I think to Daniela, it's sort of nail on the head, it's a whole discussion on its own.
It's a loaded question.
But at the end of the day, it's, when you look at a building, especially an existing cash flowing building, is you're buying a business and you're trying to determine what the brand of that building's going to be, how it's going to be managed, and how it's going to be looked at in the public eye.
Okay, so like you said, we're going to have to stop there because that is a loaded question. We could keep going on. And I want to get to Jordan's question.
Sure.
But Jordan's question actually is a theme that's piggybacking on a lot of what we've been covering today. Jordan from Toronto writes in saying, how can managers foster a sense of community? That's the key. How can managers foster a sense of community among tenants and improve retention and satisfaction? What do you think? Daniela?
Well, going back to communication, that having, a tenant base that's engaged and knowledgeable of what's happening at asset level, that creates a sense of community. Also, equally important, it's the staff that's on site. That includes, your resident manager, your leasing specialist, the operations manager, and everyone who touches that asset. Customer service and personal interactions with residents will create that close-knit community.
Okay.
Because organizing social events, that's a fairly easy task. But the key to organizing an event, it's the success rate. How successful is that event? If you don't know what your resident base likes to do as a community, then you can create and spend money on a social event that will not attract too many residents.
Nobody will come out. Right?
Nobody will come out to join you. So important is to survey the residents, to understand, what they will see as part of their engagement.
Which all goes back to communication.
Goes back to communication, right? Conducting your tenant satisfaction surveys, where you understand, what are their needs, what they value most, and what they dislike most.
Right.
So, working closely with the resident. There is another school of thought which everyone is kind of scared of.
Well, they're divided on the issue?
Tenant associations. There are school of thoughts that don't like the concept nor the idea of having a tenant association in the building, because the view is that they will create problems. They will start, to work against the property owner and property operator. But there is another school of thought that they embrace the idea of a tenant association,
really?
where you work with the tenant association.
To what capacity?
In the capacity of, tenant associations, they form to express, the tenants' views.
Right.
As long as, obviously, you filter to, to what's right from what's wrong on what's presented on the agenda. If you remember there were so many rent strikes and so many tenants that they were represented by tenant associations, a lot of the problems that they were brought, to the table were all driven by communication. We did not know about this. Nobody told us this. The landlord did not share with us this. So that was kind of the
So it's not always
theme.
about rent or
No, it's not.
boycotting the increase in rent or anything
about
like that.
having, the meetings, explaining, what's a rent increase, what it's an AGI, why is it necessary, how that AGI impacted, the life of residents, understanding, getting, that support from the tenant base. Because you have to remember, at the end of the day, the landlord is the landlord and the tenant base is the tenant base, right? So if you have someone in the middle, that's the Switzerland, right? And they will communicate between the mediator between the landlord and, the tenant, which is the tenant association, then, you have that interaction which alleviates and minimizes, the noise and the issues that they may create on the background. So again, community involvement, communication, building that relationship, having a close relationship between employees and actually senior management, being visible and transparent.
Oren, anything you want to add there or no?
Of course. Of course. Yeah, it's hard to build community. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Because of how unknown it formed. Like there's just so many unknowns on how to form a community, why it forms. It can form based on your hatred of the manager. It can form based on your love of the manager. It can form of it's so unknown how to foster it and grow it. The one thing, if there's anything that's easier, and not to say that development is easier in any way, shape, or format at all.
These days.
Not these days on any format, but because you're working with a blank slate, you can really dive deep into how to create what type of community am I creating, and how am I targeting the community, and how do I build? It's a blank. When you're working on an existing building, you're inheriting a community.
That's right.
Whether it's an enjoyable one or not, and if it's not, it's a lot more work for the property manager to get in there and say, let's figure this out. Like I don't know what to do.
Yeah, how do we turn the culture around? Right?
Yeah, like and again, it goes back. Communication and prop tech and all that stuff can help. I think it comes down to understanding the pitfalls and understanding the issues in the building from the previous owner or the current situation. And Daniela was nailed on the head. It's mediating. We are a neutral force. We are there to hear the complaints and relay them, and basically ensuring that this community can grow and be better with us involved, with a manager, us, hopefully us, but a manager in general involved in a capacity where they care and they care that the community grows, because frankly, it makes our lives easier. It makes the owner's life easier. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it makes the tenant's life. Like everybody, there's this contention and a contentious nature between residents and landlords, and sometimes fairly, based on the history of rental, that you always have to be at odds. And
or that there's just no communication, right?
And that's the cause. It's a cause and effect. You're not communicating. They don't like that, of course, and they're reacting back, and they're not gonna play ball the same way the owner wouldn't play ball, vice versa. But I think that at the end of the day, you need to be able to communicate in a professional and amicable way, so that everybody, it's their homes, it's the owner's asset. Find a way to bridge the gap.
Yeah,
and I think once you do to oversimplify again, because it's really easy to do that on a podcast, but to oversimplify this situation is once you bridge the gap of the issues and understand what has caused some contention here, that really helps to kickstart a feeling of community, because then you have someone who cares, you have someone in your corner on both sides, and then you can meet, and then you can meet in the middle.
Thank you for that. I do have to stop there because we have to move to our next point, but there was something I did want to plug there. You made a comment, Oren, about, as a developer, we get basically a blank canvas and a blank slate, and we go in and we get to form that community from the ground up, so to speak. And it is a little bit more challenging to go into an existing asset where there have been established, tenants and established culture already, and to get in there and to find out how to switch and turn it around. And I can't think of a tougher city to do that in than Toronto, especially if you're a certain sports team. So we did say Raptors, but they've got a pass, but there's another team that doesn't.
That's right.
After 60 plus years.
Yeah, exactly.
But we will move to our next segment, guys, on that note, and that is the Wacko Wheel. I told you about the Wacko Wheel, didn't I?
Did.
Chris, thanks, Chris. You brought it up there. Oren, Daniela had the pleasure of playing this game with us earlier. You have not. So for the folks watching at home, we're going to do this again. I have in my hand 4 cards here. White, yellow, blue, and pink. And each one of them represents something you see on the wheel. Okay? So we have 2 truths and a lie. We have the blame game, we have flip a coin, and we have who done it. Okay? Now, I'll explain the 4 games to you, and then Chris, our producer, is going to spin the wheel and let it land where it lands. So 2 truths and a lie is basically where I read 3 statements to both you and Daniela, and separately, you have to tell me which 2 are true and which one is a lie. Okay? The blame game. We have like a quote, okay, that we've given, we've taken from somewhere. And we ask you who is to blame for this, and basically what do you think it has done? Okay, so who's to blame and what has it done, right? Then we have one called Who Done It, right? And that is basically another quote that we have. And we ask you to say, okay, who said this and why was this said? So who done it? The blame game. Very similar, but different, okay? Same, but different, right? Then the last one, flip a coin. Flip a coin is where we flip a metaphysical coin, because I don't know if we have a coin in the studio, Chris, or not.
maybe we've got another thing we can flip it on the screen.
So basically what we do there is we give you guys a sight unseen ruling, statement, something, and one of you has to argue a pro and one of you has to argue a con. Whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, you have to do it, okay? And you get 30, Chris, what did we give him? 30 seconds or 60 seconds? What did we give him last time? Yeah, I think 60 seconds is probably what you need. Yeah, you need that, okay?
How about 120 seconds? Yeah.
Nope, you got 60 seconds.
Yeah.
You got 60 seconds. Chris just gave me the no-go zone.
It'll take me 60 seconds to think of what I'm going to say.
We'll give you a couple seconds to digest it, I promise you.
Yeah.
So you guys all agree with the rules and regulations? You get it?
Yes.
I don't think we have a choice.
Exactly.
Well, Oren, that's right. For the folks at home, Chris, let's spin that wheel. Where's it ending up today? Who done it? Who done it? All right. Well, we're going to do who done it, folks. I am going to read you something, okay? And you both can look at each other and kind of, this can be collaborative, okay?
What was it last week, just so I know?
Last week was actually flip a coin. Yeah. And Daniela and Dave
we're going to have to cut this part because that just shows you I didn't watch that part of the segment from last week.
Oren was not one of the likes and subscribers. So it says this, quote, our message to Canadians is that interest rates are very low and they're going to be there for a long time. End quote. Who said this? And was this an appropriate message to deliver to Canadians and Canadian businesses? Oren and Daniela, you get 30 seconds to talk amongst each other and try to come up with who said it.
Is this message from 2 years ago?
I think it's Tiff Macklem, and it's from during COVID when rates dropped off a cliff.
I think so, because definitely that statement cannot be made in 2024.
No.
It would be misleading.
It's either Tiff Macklem or the previous Bank of Canada head of Bank. So is it Tiff Macklem?
So I'm not allowed to respond or to coach you in any way, shape, or form.
So we have to do like a final answer thing?
It's kind of a final answer thing. Danielle and Oren?
Yeah, let's go with
Tiff
that.
Macklem. Final
Chris,
answer.
final answer, Tiff Macklem. And you are correct.
There you go.
We get a little clap applause from them, Chris. We should do that. We should hit an applause track for them. Daniela and Oren are right. The Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem said that following quote. And he was telling Canadians at the time when we had low interest rates that it would remain that way for a very long time. We all know what happened starting in 2022. So the next part of the question is for Oren and Daniela. Was this an appropriate thing to tell Canadians and Canadian business owners in light of current market conditions?
In hindsight, very obviously not. Interest rates shot up 500%, something crazy. We're been in a relatively high interest rate environment for over a year now, starting to see some cuts. No, the answer is no. It wasn't the right thing to say. Hindsight's 2020 though. Maybe it was the right thing at the time.
So, Daniela, do you think that this was done at the time to help spur economic activity or to encourage Canadians, or was this just false promises that everything's going to be okay?
It's hard to say because, as we know, whatever happens, behind the closed doors with the government and the banks, it's a mystery to us. My personal opinion, and I strictly speak for myself, I think it was done to just boost morale, considering the statement happened during COVID, and to increase and to entice spending.
Right.
because no one was spending. We all know how was the situation during COVID, and that statement probably was a prompter to boost confidence.
But Oren, as a business owner, and I see you looking at me, looking at what we're looking at right now with mounting receiverships coming online, as a business owner, we understand why it was done for the Canadian consumer and confidence. What were the pitfalls for business owners, and what are we seeing now?
I think it's the same pitfalls for consumers as well. I mean, the problem is that you give people, I don't want to go down a path of inflation, the discussion of what inflation is and why, but you tell people that money is going to be cheap for a long time, they're going to spend, and they're going to borrow, and they're going to borrow a lot because it's cheap. And we're seeing it now. I mean, I think that there's a mountain of debt on the residential side because people bought at the highest price and lowest interest rate, and they're going to be coming due on their 5-year terms, going from some people as low as 0.99%, jumping all the way to 6%. It's a massive swing. And it's going to hurt a lot of people. So, I mean, at the time when investment was stalled and there was a fear of, recession and during COVID, and it was really an unknown state.
Well, it was a scary time.
Scary times. Nobody knew it was going to happen. So at that time, I mean, I can understand trying to spur the economy. It makes total sense. But obviously, when you do that, you spur it to a certain point and over-accelerate it.
Consequence,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I mean, it should have been. I mean, whether it should or shouldn't, I'm not an economist, but at the end of the day, like, tell people to spend, and that money's going to be cheap for a while. They will. Right. It's just an easy thing, and you'll buy because things are cheaper, and it'll increase inflation, which is what we saw.
Last point before we head off, because this is a segue.
Sure.
Oren, as a not just a CEO and a president of a property management company, but also as an acquisition specialist and on the development arm of things, this new interest rate environment, what has that done to has it curtailed or has it helping solve the housing supply crisis?
It definitely hasn't helped. Things are challenging to build, to buy, and it's in part due to the fact that people bought at highs, and it's difficult to.
And developers too, right?
Developers bought them. People bought buildings, and you run into problems now because values are not where they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So it's difficult. It's difficult to make the numbers. It was difficult to make the numbers work before on rental. And generally, I mean, you're competing with condo. It's land values are out of whack, and it's difficult to make them work now because interest costs are so high. There are good benefits of some of these programs. CMHC has came out with a good program.
Housing Accelerator Fund or whatever.
Their MLS Select programs, and there are other. I think some cities and municipalities are looking to trying to push and incentivize rental development. And I think rental being not all of it is affordable by definition, but an affordable and attainable form of housing. There's ways of having it penciled, but it's difficult. It has to be the right type of build. It has to be the right configuration in the right market with the right rents and the right
very
people.
Complex.
There's a lot that goes into it, and it's the same thing on the acquisition side. From an existing standpoint, it's how do you if somebody wants to sell it at a 3.5 cap, well, how do you make sense of that when your debt is at 6, like your negative leverage for a while?
Yeah.
So it's difficult. It's hard to pencil, but it's finding those deals. It's being determined, and it's going through and really finding a deal and sniffing out the problems like we discussed earlier. It's finding ways of extracting value. So getting creative.
That's a great way to end the show. I want to thank both Daniela and Oren for being our guests here on episode 3, Property Pulse. Folks, you heard from Oren and Daniela a little bit about the intangible assets and the things we look for here. And one thing that I think was a common theme here was communicate. That's great for our relationships. It's great for everything, especially in property management and owning real estate. That's really why we built this podcast, to communicate, to help tell you a little bit about what we go through and what we do, and begin to open up the discussion. Speaking of communicate, what Oren was leaving off with, which was a wonderful segue, talking about, Tiff Macklem's interest rates will stay low for a very, very long time. Well, we know they didn't, and we know that prices went low. So that has caused a bit of a glut in getting supply back online and helping to fix this housing crisis that we are going through right now. And next week, I want you to join us here in studio. Next month, sorry, I should say, which is coming up in the weeks, I should say. We're going to be joined with two of the relatively controversial gentlemen, bad boys in their own right. We're going to be joined with Richard Lyall from ResCon and Marlon Bray from Altus Group, who are our guests here to discuss the housing supply crisis, who done it, how do we fix it, and what can we do collectively to better our situation. Thank you all for joining us here on Above the Line, where tradition meets innovation. I'm your host, Matt Garnett. We'll see you next time.